The following book was mentioned in Pike and Hayward's Cases of Conscience, which was published in 1755. This is originally published in 1707. It is called The Glorious Victory of Chastity and Joseph's Hard Conflict, meaning with Potiphar's wife, and his happy escape. The author is John Jenks, rector of Harley in Shropshire, and chaplain to the Right Honourable Earl of Bradford. Genesis 39:9, How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? The story of Joseph contains such a noble subject of consideration as is much the more illustrious for all those bright rays of divine influence, which we may observe here and there, so remarkably falling into it. For even in every turn of his affairs, a kind of providence still followed him, and watched over him to take care of him, and to choose his inheritance for him. Yea, when things went never so cross with him, yet under the very frowns of the world heaven smiled upon him. And no less do I wonder to find such wonderful passages in his life when I look upon him as a type, an eminent representative of our blessed Lord himself, both in his depression and temptation, and also in his rise and exaltation, being spited and sold away by his brethren, falsely accused and condemned to lie and suffer with malefactors, yet he happily weathered out all the storms, and nothing could prevent his advancement to honor, and that even of the highest post. He was made to be great, but little would one have thought so at his first setting out, when twice he was bartered away as a beast in the market, first by his own nearest kindred to the Ishmaelite carriers going down into Egypt, and again by those chapmen to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. But in his very adversity, prosperity did attend him, because the Lord was with him. For whom God will raise, in vain do men endeavor to suppress. His new master, the Egyptian officer, took notice that the Lord made all which Joseph did to prosper in his hand. Genesis 39, verse 3. And therefore he cast a very sweet aspect upon him. And Joseph found favor in his sight, verse 4. Nor did he any more use him as a slave or underling, but made him overseer of his house and all that he had put into his hand. Whereupon he quickly found what a wise thing he had done, and what a profitable superintendent over his affairs he had found, for everything succeeded the better in which Joseph had a hand. And thenceforward the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had, in the house and in the field, verse 5. Therefore did he deliver up all to Joseph's management, and trusted the whole that he had to this new steward's custody, with whom he was so highly satisfied, that he took no further care to look after anything himself. But it is said in verse 6, he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. This is a mighty confidence in a stranger, but he knew what he did, and how well the trust was placed in such a favorite of heaven, crowned with blessings from above, and a continued series of all good success, where we see a master happy in the best servant, and a servant is happy in the kindest master. But in this uncertain world, alas, what sweet sunshine without a succession of clouds and storms! What bright day that does not close up in a dark night, when all was so flourishing with Joseph, and everything round about him looked so gay upon him, yet there was a foul tempest hanging over him, and an ill instrument devising wickedness against him, to involve him in trouble and mischief, and give him the hardest task, to save first his virtue and then his life. His mistress became the lewd tempter to haunt and importune him, and forgetting her sex as well as her duty, very urgent and pressing she was with him, and with repeated onsets hung burdensome upon him. And when she found herself baffled in the attempt, that there was no gaining of her point, but the holy good man, though wearied out of his patience, would not part with his innocence, stood the shock of all her solicitations, and not only despised her courtship, but abhorred her motions, the love and lust in turned all to spite and rage, and the impudence of an audacious strumpet grew to the hardiness of a notorious liar. She went and made an uproar in the house, and forged a devilish falsehood, telling first to the servants and then to the master as soon as he came home what a villain this Joseph had showed himself, violently to assault her chastity, so that for her own safety she was forced to make an outcry, upon which the guilty fled and left his coat behind him, which he kept as a monument and evidence of his crime, to show and convince her lord. See how fruitful is one wickedness to breed another, and also how cunning to palliate and defend itself. For here was a very plausible tale, like to find credulous ears, yea, to win pity and favour to the seemingly oppressed, and to pull on indignation and revenge upon the daring aggressor. Such a quick and witty invention have the obnoxious to cover their shame, and so ready is the father of lies to help out his vassals, and suggest to them somewhat or other still to credit their cause and defend themselves in the possession of their lusts. And this plot so laid did take, and had the effect which she wished. For the master, upon his wife's report of the matter, was all in a flame. His wrath was kindled, verse 19. And too hasty, without further inquiry or examination of the allegation, and too uncharitable to his good and faithful servant, presently clapped him up in prison. Thus may innocence be spit upon and run down, and such as stand never so clear and untainted may yet hear hard things and lie under the foulest reproaches, as if they were the worst of men that deserved it all. But this will not last always. No, God in his due time will vindicate the cause of his slandered servants, and bring forth their righteousness as a light and their judgment as a noonday. Psalm 37:6. Though the wicked watches the righteous and seeks to slay him, the Lord will not leave him in his hand, nor condemn him when he is judged, verse 32 and 33. Therefore it follows, wait on the Lord and keep his way. Be not discouraged there to proceed, because you do well, and for yet he will exalt you to inherit the land, and when the wicked are cut off, you shall see it. So did it prove here, in the case of this impeached and abused servant of the Lord. Though he was made a prisoner, yet even here he found such favor that he was trusted as a head jailer, and had liberty to do his own pleasure, and all the rest were ordered as he gave the word. Yea, the very prison, that low place, was made a step to his highest preferment, even the next place to the throne, and to govern all the land of Egypt. For the Lord making him wise as an angel of God, to interpret dreams, first those of Pharaoh's butler and baker in the prison. Upon the credit of this he was after called to do as much for the king himself, to interpret Pharaoh's own dreams, which he did so much to the king's content, that he thereupon presently set him up to that eminent height described in Genesis 41, verses 40 to 43. You shall be over my house, and according to your word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, or silk, proper for that hot country, and put a gold chain about his neck, and he made him to ride in the second chariot that he had. And they cried before him, Bow the knee, and he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. Now here was virtue and piety breaking out of clouds and obscurity to a glorious luster and dignity. Now he was in a condition to retaliate and be even with his spiteful brethren that sold him away, and very kindly indeed he was revenged upon them, first to entertain them with the best fare and all the endearments of comfortable words and obliging carriage, and the discovery and opening of himself to them, and afterwards to pleasure them with all the fat and the good of the land of Egypt, in which he instated and settled them, and all that belonged to them, so highly setting up his whole family, as well as wonderfully reviving the spirit of his aged father, not only to see the face of that son whom he had given up for lost, but also to enjoy the transporting sight and share in the happy fruits of his greatness and glory and lordship over all the land. And though such splendor and honor is not always to be reckoned upon in this world by all that do righteously and suffer wrongfully, yet whoever you are, when conscious to your own integrity, though aspersed and heavily charged with the things which you have not done, and dressed up for such a one as you know yourself not to be, then be in no care about the manner, so as to break out in bluster and execute vengeance. But wait patiently for the Lord, and commit your cause to him that judges righteously, never fearing but, in good time, he will lay open mysteries of iniquity, and bring to light the hidden things of darkness. Put your accusers to confusion, and make them to know that he has loved you. Oh, what a guard and strong tower is uprightness, to make the righteous bold as a lion, and undaunted under all calumnies and abuses. Never violate conscience, then, but stem the tide of all temptations that would put you beside your duty, and still preserve your integrity. So you shall find it a sure friend and a sweet retreat to you, whatever befalls you. Resolve with that upright man in Job 27:6, my righteousness I hold fast, and will not let it go. My heart shall not reprove me so long as I live. And take pattern by the excellent person here to act bravely as he did, when any way tempted as he was, to put off all the circumventions and insinuations, all the inveiglements and persuasions of any tempters to folly and filthiness, with such a replication as is here. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? The interrogation speaks his detestation of the lewdness to which he was solicited, that he would not hear talk of any such thing, though he showed the respect to a mistress, so as to reason and withstand her with arguments, and not presently flew in her face to give her the hard name she deserved. Yet was he nothing the nearer to a compliance in becoming a party in her wickedness. For let superiors be never so vicious in forgetting all their duty, yet we must not be so rude with them as to forget all decency, but give them the deference belonging to their places, and at the same time show such resentment of their ungodliness as to let them understand that we cannot brook or like it any better in them than in any others, nor will ever be awed or influenced by them to consent and join with them, and so lose ourselves with him that is infinitely greater and better than any of them. Here is a handsome and unanswerable put-off. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? It signifies an absolute refusal of the evil suggested, as much as if he had said, I will not do it. But, lest that should be taken for too blunt and short, as carrying more of will than of reason in it, the holy man so contrives his answer as to be full of argument, to carry a shining light and a sharp conviction in it, and not only to give a repulse, but at the same time also an implicit instruction to the tempting companion. How can I do it? Supposes not only an unreasonableness, but a kind of impossibility in the case. For any right, ingenuous, and pious man win himself to be so concerned. Again, he declares his utter aversion to it is an ill thing, never to be allowed. How can I do this wickedness? Yea, more than an ordinary evil, an aggravated iniquity, this great wickedness. And yet further he throws it out with indignation, not only as an injury to his neighbor and his master, but a heinous offense and provocation against his supreme Lord and Maker. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Now this was to strike all dead. Speak not a word more to me of any such matter. It is to no purpose, for God is against it, and therefore I will not ever be for it. If it be to turn him against me who is more than all the world to me, I will never hearken to you, nor to any one upon earth that should so offer to tempt me. No. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? But before I take into consideration the manner of his conquering the temptation, let me observe how he was put to it, and to what a height the temptation did rise upon him, in a measure more than ordinary, to try him. For the one will more illustrate and set off the other, and the brighter will shine that victory where have been the sharper encounters and the greater difficulty. The higher renown is due to those warriors who have grappled with enemies and hardships, which to others might appear insuperable, and have made their way through such brushes and obstacles where weak or common forces would have presently yielded and given up all. Now the temptations of Joseph were not barely from the pleasures of sin. and those brutish delights of gratifying fleshly lusts, which is that wide and filthy ditch where so great a part of this world is commonly plunged and lost. This is not all, that he had the opportunity to take his fill of those stolen sweets and glut himself to work all uncleanness with greediness, when the whorish woman had so laid the scene that the master was abroad and they were so solitary as to be out of the reach of all other company. But there were some things more peculiar in the temptation, such as the prosperity of the tempted, the sex of the tempter, her doting upon him and her superiority over him, number 1. The person tempted was young, and hale and prosperous, in the flower and prime of his age, in the vigor and briskness of a firm constitution, in the warmth and fermentation of blood and spirits, basking in the smiles of fortune, favored by a potent master, and made the topping man of all his family, to have what he would and to command all as he pleased. Here was a fine flourishing youngster, one might have thought, fit to be catched in the devil's snare of fleshly pleasure, right for the purpose to swallow the baits of lust even as soon as thrown before him. But he proved another man, and showed himself more wise and staunch than so to be caught, that he would not fly to so common excuse of lewdness, and smooth it off as a trick of youth. No, but let the world see that a young, fresh, lively man could yet be a chaste, virtuous, honest, and godly man, and so make good what after he said, in Genesis 42:18, I fear God. And oh, how truly great and praiseworthy is it for them that are youthful, healthy, and vigorous, to be sober, modest, and religious, so to remember their Creator, is not to be drawn away by the tempter when you are not under the decays of nature, nor going down the hill, as they call it, but coming into the world and pushed on by flesh and blood to follow the common way of the world. Yet you decline it and mortify the youthful lusts, and will not run with the giddy gang to their wild assemblies and excesses, sportings, and fooleries. This indeed is now your high honour, and presages also your everlasting pleasure. Though the corrupt sinner will be your censurer, and applaud the lewd youngster, when he has committed his vile prank, crying, I commend him for it, what should he do else? Your God and your conscience and all that are wise and worthy will indeed justify and praise you for the contrary. And therefore does the young Joseph live so renowned in the memories of God's servants, and will do so to the world's end, for holding in the lusts and keeping under the body, which would have thrown him upon the enticing wickedness, and his wanton mistress stands recorded, only to be exposed and abominated by all the world, as much as her lascivious overtures were rejected and loathed by this truly good and worthy hero, who did not escape the scorching because he had nothing in his nature to take fire, but because his grace and virtue overruled everything that was opposite and contrary to his duty. For to some it is small thanks that they abstain, and not so much of their holy choice as their bodily temper. And so they may be proud of that, which is none of their praise, and when cold and dry or distempered and afflicted, may insult instead of pitying the tempted, because they know not how hard is the battle of chastity, in which is complete vigor of body and all worldly prosperity. But to be under the circumstances of a Joseph, young and lusty, fresh and fair liking, having all about him to please and nothing to trouble him, yet to possess his vessel in sanctification and honor, and not admit of a temptation to corrupt him, though offered with all the address and invitation imaginable to him, this is an achievement worthy of a hero, and such honor as belongs only to God's saints. Number 2. The temptation was greater from the sex of the tempter, that a woman should so beset a man, though it redounded more to her infamy, as being the reverse of that modesty which is a woman's glory, and showed her to be arrived at the impudence which many a woman, though quite too bad, yet is not reached to. I say, though the lewd attack branded the woman for a stigmatized creature, meriting the utmost confusion, Yet at the same time, how much bigger did it render the trial to a man, and such a polite, courtly man as Joseph was, to cast scorn and disdain upon a female solicitor, when even the common usage of the world in most places gives so much respect to that sex and honor to the weaker vessel that their very requests passes for commands, and men count it rude to cast out the suit where a woman is a petitioner. But here the courtier had rather be thought a clown than be found a brute, and would please no lady on earth to lose himself with his great Lord in heaven. And surely Joseph was in the right not to mind so much the person asking as the thing asked. For had it been fit for a modest woman to seek, and for a worthy man to grant, however great or hard to be done, he would have strove for the honor of fulfilling her desire. But when it was that which was impudent to be requested, and criminal to be yielded to, he could not then compliment her with God's right, nor give his body to the woman, when at the same time he must give his soul to the devil. And how well had it been for us all if the first man had showed more of this resistance, and been less easy and complacent to a woman, in such an ill thing as was against God's express charge, and not think to excuse it as he did, Genesis 3:12, the woman which you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. If any woman have the face to propose what is so base and wicked, or make signs for the doing of such a thing as no man that fears God can consent to or allow of, you must have the face in, the courage and the conscience, to put her ill manners to shame, and frowning upon the fulsome wanton and scorning the ungodly motion. And in such a case, don't fear to forget your breeding and your courtship, when any infamous creature can so forget her sex and her God. Number 3. The temptation grew upon Joseph, that it was not only a woman which offered it, but such a one as doted upon him, and had him in admiration, was so fond of him that she longed after him, and day by day became a beggar to him. For it is said, verse 6, Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. He was of a taking aspect, and made a lovely figure. And it came to pass after these things, that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. Thus she looked so as to lust, and through her eyes passed a concupiscence which fired her heart. Now here were the eyes full of adultery, that could not cease from sin, 2 Peter 2:14. So David's lust, that cost him so very dear, entered in, and upon the licentious gazing on Bathsheba, 2 Samuel 11:2. And oh, how many have been betrayed and undone by the thieves coming in at these casements. Therefore, if we do not make Job's covenant with our eyes, not to look, yet I am sure it is no more than needful for us to make David's prayer to God that he would restrain them from looking to our hurt and ruin. Psalm 119, verse 37, Turn away mine eyes from beholding vanity. Though beauty, as it is a creature of God, and a sort of silent harmony and charming music to the eye, is not to be defamed and set at naught, but that which is lovely in itself deserves to be loved by us, so that it be the object of an inferior love, and not made the jewel of burning lust. Yet there is a snare and danger in it, both to the possessors of it and to the gazers at it. They that have it lie under the temptation to be proud of it, to value themselves too much upon it, and to be so pleased and tickled with the praise of it, is the easier to be caught in the toils of those that have no better design upon them than by this to entrap them. And so their vanishing beauty helps to draw upon them an everlasting deformity, and by their fair faces they lose their precious souls. And they also that give themselves to gaze on beauty till they are entangled and overcome, as here Potiphar's wife was. Oh, how do they sacrifice all their better sense to their bodily sight, and let out their wits and their souls at their eyes, till they leave nothing but fools and brutes behind, when such splendid images of the alluring objects are imprinted on the brain, that nothing else can be thought of or counted worth the regarding than God and Christ and heaven and the glory eternal, are all forgotten and postponed, yea, all fold away and given up for a face, i.e., for a piece of finer dirt. So the vain woman here made herself so vile. She that might, if she would, have discerned and falsely viewed another and better beauty in Joseph, had she looked further than his poor perishing body, into his precious heavenly soul, she might thus have entertained her contemplation not to destruction, but to edification, and might have seen there the wisdom, the grace, and piety which should have controlled her folly, and struck dead all the very thoughts of her lascivious impurity. But the lust so bloated her eyes she could see nothing but that flesh which was the fuel of her wild fire, and made her covet nothing so much as her sin and shame and undoing. And oh, how many unthinking men do thus lose themselves and become captives not only to their harlots, but to the murderer of their souls, and so may come at last to wish that they had never enjoyed the use of their sight, rather than so to abuse it, only to debauch their minds and feed their lusts and ruin their souls. But how great here was the temptation to Joseph, that such a one should be so much taken with him, and first set her eyes and then her heart upon him, and despise all else in comparison of him. For how apt are we highly to prize those that have the high esteem for us, and to think ourselves obliged in a just as well as kind retaliation, to return love back again to our lovers. Being naturally fond of ourselves, we cannot but like well of such as agree with us, to think as favorably of us, and entertain the dear kindness for us. Yet how much soever Joseph might think this pretender was enamored with him, he would not be entangled by her, nor let her admiration of him be the lure to catch him in her snares. No, he looked on her eyes, and so vitiated with a peccant humour, that she could see nothing in him but what was fit to serve her lewd design upon him, and then he abhorred to think that ever the servant of God should truckle to so vile a purpose. Yea, it was enough to put him quite out of conceit with that beauty which should be made to pander to iniquity, and to put him upon wishing that his face had been all but a scab, rather than it should ever be used as a bait to the devil's snare. And here, see the vanity to be caught with the complexion or proportion of a face, which is one of those common traps by which the enemy beguiles and takes so many silly souls. And you that make such an idol of your face, and you that make such a work to set off your face, and render it more alluring to draw in the eyes of fools, oh, think with yourself, where will be the pride of that face, when sickness, age, and death have come over it, and all demolished it forever? And oh, what joy then will you have in the encomiums and the remembrance of that face, which was made the price of souls, both your own and others, that cost you your soul for making it the great incentive of your pride and lust, and that cost the souls also of those whom you did set yourself to bewitch and draw them from their God and their duty, to dote on your beauty and partake with you in your sinful vanity, your destructive folly. Number 4. Joseph's temptation rose up yet higher from his mistress' superiority over him, that she was in place and quality so much above him, and have such a one favour was no small matter, but the privilege in which many a one would have been so proud as to buy it even at any rate. Oh, how few would have thought it a dear purchase to pawn their chastity for it! Would not some rather have boasted of the honour and then stuck at the sin? They that can glory in their shame, when it is but to have their will of an inferior prostitute, yea, that can belie themselves to brag of their lewdness, even with such as they have not touched, how would they have swelled with the attainment to get up into their honourable master's bed, yea, to be courted to it by one so much their superior, and thereby to gratify their pride and lust both together, such as can stoop and debase their souls into a subjection to the vilest strumpet, where they may get nothing but to empty their souls of honesty, and their purses of money, and to fill their names with a brand, their bodies with a plague, and their conscience with stings, none of them ever to be worn off or fetched out. Oh, how would they have applauded the felicity of such an opportunity, and reckoned themselves even in paradise to be so preferred! But Joseph was wiser and better than to be blinded in gold with such shows and shams. He knew this fine-coloured worm to be still but a worm, and the wanton lady, though never so gay, to be but a filthy harlot, such as God would judge, and without any respect of persons, condemn. And alas, what more comfort would it be for you to be strangled with a silken cord than with a hempen rope? You may be as miserably hanged in silver chains as if they were made of iron. The great whore will at last find little cause of rejoicing in the prerogative to be greatly plagued, and that wretched captive who falls such a prey will perceive as little relief in hell's misery that the wickedness which threw him upon it looked with a fair face and made a flourishing appearance. For all that is damnable uses to seem so plausible, or else the tempter would find more checks in his trade, and more often lose his pains. Oh, how many are now in hell, who were beguiled there by that which once shined in their eyes even like heaven. It was the beautiful aspect, the rich equipage, and the gaudy trappings of the temptation, these that befooled them and undid them. And such is all the devil's friendship, so to dress up the sin as to make it fit to catch and spill the soul. Oh, see through it then as Joseph did. Look beyond the tempting bait to the deadly hook. And if it be offered to you as a piece of kindness and advantage, think how you would like the kindness to be hugged to death, or what advantage you would count it to be drowned in a pit of milk or honey. Oh, how much more to you is your soul's life and salvation than any, the biggest friend's humor and satisfaction. Nay, is that your friend who would pull you from your God and from heaven to involve you in the snare and condemnation of the devil? Oh, cruel kindness to do you the deadly mischief, for which neither that friend nor all the world can ever make you any recompense. A true friend would seek your real good, and not go to make you miserable forever, and let him seem never so able and ready to do mighty manners for you, is what might not Joseph now have expected in this world from the tempting dame. Yet if that friend acts Satan's part and takes the very way of a most deadly enemy to your soul, suspect then and reject all the proffered kindness, and look upon it but as a devil tricked up in a winning mien and splendid attire, and so coming about you only to put the undoing cheat upon you. If the friend that breathes nothing but dearness, and raises your expectation of this, and tells you what he will do for you, if he go about to invade your soul's rights, and to plunder you of far better goods than ever he can give to you, in other words, to bereave you of your virtue, your chastity, your present peace, and your everlasting happiness, though it be your superior, your master, your guardian, your chief promoter, on whom hang all your worldly hopes and fortunes, yet scorn the offer, and defy the tempter, and venture all his displeasure. If he forget his love and his duty, do not you forget your God and your safety. If he blush not to be such a transgressor, you need not blush to be his reprover. If he bid you never so high to make you the prey of his lust, and a child of hell, alas, poor creature, what a wretched purchase would you have of it, to gain such a friend, when to gain even the whole world would signify nothing, nor do you any of the least good, set over against the loss of your soul. Oh, then be choice of your jewel, and look narrowly to your darling, your dear, your only one, and never let the greatest of your friends, nor the most promising advantages of the world, so befool and delude you as to prevail with you to expose and give up that, which when once gone is to be never recovered, never any manner of compensation to be made for that damage, but it will be absolutely irreparable, and by it you must lie and cry and smart and grieve, even world without end. Let the temptation come then from what quarter it will. Let it be recommended with all the address and colours which wit and art, wealth and honour, can put upon it. Yet think still with yourself, alas, what is here but a cloud and fiction and an empty nothing? What price is this for your soul? Here the tempter now is raising a mist to dim your sight, and shakes his tinsel wares and flying flags to dazzle your eyes. But I see the cheat and the danger. There is only a little varnish, and some shadow of good, but in truth all is stark nothing, and beyond the bare surface nothing but the worst of evil. I will stand my ground then, and resist steadfast in the faith. Yea, I will resist even to blood, striving against sin, rather than so lose my God and throw away my soul. But there was yet a further addition to Joseph's sharp temptation, that he was not only to despise and forfeit all the favor which he might have found with his lewd mistress, all that she might have done for him, and the kindness more than ordinary which she was capable, and would have been likely to show him, complying with her pleasure. But in case of refusal, he also laid himself open to her fury, and to all the mischief which the resentment of a despised, disobliged, and exasperated superior might bring upon him. For what more enrages the tempters than the breaking of all their measures, to find their plots impertinent, and themselves so baffled, to have their suit thrown back in their faces, and instead of gaining their end, to be put to shame instead of consent, to find a reprimand. This cannot be digested by the lascivious brutes, whose dear love then changes shape and transforms itself into mad choler, the objects with which they could not prevail to make them the conquest of their lust. They are for throwing down another way. It's the sacrifice of their revenge. So it proved in the case of Joseph here. The wanton that unsuccessfully attempted him turned bitterly to prosecute him, to lay grievous things to his charge and seek his ruin for this world, where she could not hurt him for another. And so he ventured not only his liberty, but his life to withstand her. And such being his pious resolution, God, that favors the righteous, so prospered him in it, that all the mischief which this enraged woman strove to bring upon him, through that kind providence which watches over the innocent oppressed, did but lay a foundation, and prepare the way for his further honor and welfare. As the author of the Book of Wisdom sets forth his case in chapter 10, 13, and 14, when the righteous was sold, wisdom forsook him not, but delivered him from sin, and went down with him into the pit, and left him not in bonds, till she brought him the scepter of the kingdom and power against him that oppressed him. As for those that accused him, she showed them to be liars, and gave him perpetual glory. Though you may then not only lose advantages of the world, but make some your cruel enemies, and run yourself into straits and hazards by scorning their filthy motions, and frowning on the fawning tempters, to let them see that they have mistaken their game, and that you are not for their return, but will keep faith inviolate with the heavenly bridegroom, and preserve the flower untouched by any such unclean hands, for which they may blast your reputation, yea, and devise your destruction. Yea, be it so. Let them do the worst they are able. Oh, how much better is it for you to bear their spite than God's wrath, when you have a conscience within to support you, and heavenly hopes in prospect to refresh you, and for some false friends that would abuse and betray you, shall find a friend more and better than all, that will stick to you, and be not only your present vindicator, but your everlasting comforter. Be still on your guard, then, to secure the main prize, whatever you are like to get or lose of the world. Let not that be so much your care as to maintain your integrity, and a purity of your soul, with such a delicate tenderness as the libertines will call preciseness, and make it the manner of their laughter. But let them laugh that win, and through the divine blessing upon their care and endeavor, do get such a victory as was here obtained by the spiritual warrior. And how he stood the shock of all assaults, and by what means he surmounted those difficulties with which he was to grapple, and those hazards which made the event so dubious, will be worth the inquiry, not only to gratify our curiosity, but also to encourage our imitation of such eminent virtue and piety. But before I come to that which quite turned the scale with Joseph, to determine his choice and govern all his conduct in this manner, let me take notice of some previous reasonings by which he gave a check and repulse to the female tempter, verse 8. He refused, and said to his master's wife, Behold, My master has not withheld from me anything in the house, and he has committed all that he has into my hand. In verse 9, neither has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. Or he argues from gratitude, from fidelity, and from common honesty. From gratitude in the obligation which his master had laid upon him, number 1, in doing so much as he had done for him, when he was his property, one that he had bought with his money at the hand of strangers, out of another country, and so he might have used him only for a slave, to make him serve as a beast of burden, or to employ him in the basest offices and the hardest drudgeries, yet seeing him fit for better things, and from experience had of him, growing to entertain a singular favor for him, he set him up next to himself to be the head of his house. And who but Joseph, whom all the rest must have recourse to, and depend upon, and be ordered by. Now here the principle of ingenuity worked and prevailed with him to make him reflect and think within himself who it was that so deeply had engaged him, and done the things so exceeding kind for him, and then to capitulate with the unworthy tempter, that would have made him guilty of the greatest baseness, most horribly to abuse all such extraordinary bounty of his most generous and noble benefactor? Shall I thus retaliate and make him amends for such unparalleled indulgence and liberality to a foreign exile, a poor stranger, to put upon him an indelible brand of infamy, who has placed upon me the marks of highest honor and dignity, to do him an irreparable mischief, who has done me such wonderful kindness? No, it shall never be said that Joseph was such a villain, that my magnificent patron took the snake into his bosom, which flew in his face, and that the favorite of such a friend was for pecking out his eyes. And oh, that all the obliged of God and man would be so candid as thus to know themselves as well as their owners, and remember whose creatures they are, and make some fairer returns than to pay them hatred for their good will, and only throw their contempt upon such as have made them considerable. Especially may the redeemed of the Lord be ever mindful of the low wretched estate in which he found them, and out of which he took them, and not offer to cloud the grace of God which has made them to differ, after they have been raised out of the dust and the dunghill, to sit with the children of the Most High, that they may not ruffle in the borrowed plumes as if they had not received them, nor wantonly spurn at him that keeps and feeds them in the very strength of his own largesses conferred upon them, which is worse manners than of the ox and the ass that know their owners and their master's crib, and are observant of them whom they find so kind to them. Number 2, Joseph argues from fidelity to the trust which his master had committed to him. He has showed the confidence which he possesses in me, by putting all under my power, and little concerning himself with anything that he has. And shall I be the traitor, to falsify that credit which he has given me, and deceive him in the good opinion that he is pleased to have of me? This be far from me, especially to run into that most egregious falsehood and abomination, to invade my master's bed. How do I abhor the very thoughts of such most odious treason, and how uneasy does it make me in my mind that any one should ever but offer to put me upon a denial here. And oh, that all servants would give more regard to the worthy pattern of such a true and faithful servant, for how rare are the right conscientious godly servants to be found, how unfit to be trusted are the most. They have an eye to their wages more than to their business, and show a far greater concern for their own ease and pleasure than for their master's credit and profit. And they don't care how they purloin and pilfer from him, to rob him of their time and skill and strength, all of which they have hired out and engaged to him, and ready to strike in even with any against him to abuse and defraud him. O you that are under the yoke, and have taken the care and trust of such places upon you, where you cannot be always under the master's eye, but must often be left to yourselves and to the proof of your own fidelity in this, sirs, lies your highest praise as well as your great concern, to approve your fidelity to men in doing all heartily as to the Lord, and for conscience sake towards God your great master in heaven, who sees and observes you when your masters on earth don't. For it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful, 1 Corinthians 4:2. And all your wit and cunning, and all your strength at work, and all your quick dispatch is as nothing, if you are false and slippery, and not punctually honest and trusty, to do your offices in the fear of God more than for the awe of men. Your slightness in business and carelessness of your master's reputation, your profuseness or knavishness to do a willful damage in any of his goods or concerns, these are the dead flies in the ointment that render all else which belongs to you unsavory. And whatever you may be in any other respect, this is even as bad as can be said of you, that you cannot be trusted, that any longer than you can be narrowly inspected, you are good for nothing, that from under the master's eye you have no care what you do, and behind his back you will even cut his throat. And then what readier way to ruin your own names and to make everybody that knows you afraid to receive you? But you will not approve and commend a trusty servant and speak for him and help to promote him. This gives the memory of Joseph still so sweet an aroma that he preferred his master's interest and honor before his own lust and pleasure. It would not do an ill thing to wrong him, whatever he might have got by doing it. And here, according to the usual success of such self-denial, by denying of himself he did the greatest kindness to himself, and therefore does his name still sound so sweet and great, because he would not endure the motion to be false and not. Here was the pearl of price, a servant worth more than gold. May all who are in that capacity look to the glorious example and be proud of the imitation. Abide in your calling then with God, and so for his sake be just and true to man. Stand up for your master's credit, and lay out yourself for his profit, as much when he is out of the way as if watching over you. Never betray him, upon any temptation whatsoever, though your own lust or your need, though a poor body or your own intimate partner should be the solicitor, nay, though your master should tempt you to be false to your mistress, or your mistress tempt you to be false to your master, whoever it be that bids for your fidelity, don't hear of the talk of the terms to drive that bargain. Buy the truth, don't sell it, and the more you are trusted, count yourself to be still the further obliged. And where you have the kind master that favors as well as trusts you, say, I will die before I will be a thief or a knave to such an one. All the world shall never prevail with me to betray my trust. I will never betray the master who is so much also my friend and even as my father. This has been a reading of the Glorious Victory of Chastity by John Jenks. This will be continued in the next podcast. This is a Puritan and Reformed audiobook podcast.